to page 93. And the next two pages. The relationship between masses and crowds have been much discussed, and distinctions have been drawn between masses and massification. The first is a gathering of a temporary crowd. That's masses. And massification is the involvement of individuals in a permanent social cycle. Involvement of individuals in a permanent social cycle. Massification. Certainly, a crowd gathered at a given point is not, properly speaking, a mass. A mass society is a society with considerable population density in which local structures and organizations are weak. Currents of opinion are strongly felt. Men are grouped into large and influential collectives. The individual is part of these collectives, and a certain psychological unity exists. Mass society, moreover, is characterized by a certain uniformity of material life. Despite differences of environment, training, or situation, the men of a mass society have the same preoccupations, the same interests in technical matters, the same mythical beliefs, the same prejudices. A mass society is also a strongly organized society. John Albig makes a profound observation when he says that propaganda is an inevitable concomitant of the growth and organization of society. So, propaganda makes the growth and organization of society inevitable. The individuals making up the mass in the grip of propaganda may seem quite diversified, but they have enough in common for propaganda to act on them directly. In contemporary society, there actually is a close relation between mass and crowd. Because a mass society exists, crowds can gather frequently until coronavirus. But that even made even more crowds and protests. That is, the individual constantly moves from one crowd to another, from a street crowd to a factory crowd, or a theater crowd, a subway crowd, a crowd gathered at a meeting. Conversely, The very fact of belonging to crowds turns the individual more and more into a mass man, and thus modifies his very being. There is no question that man's psychic being is modified by his belonging to a mass society. This modification takes place even if no propaganda appeal is made to the soul of the crowd or the spirit or the collective. The individual produced by a mass society is more readily available, more credulous, more suggestible, more excitable. So the proper gender right there. Under such conditions, propaganda can develop best. Because a mass society existed in Western Europe at the end of the 19th century and the first half of the 20th, propaganda became possible and necessary. The propaganda is not only possible, but it's necessary. In Western Europe of the mass society. From mass society emerged the psychological elements most favorable to propaganda: symbols and stereotypes. Of course, these also exist in small groups and limited societies, but there they are not of the same kind, number, or degree of abstraction. So, psychological elements that are most favorable to propaganda in a mass society, which were emerged by the mass society, are symbols and stereotypes. These are also there in small groups and limited societies, but they're not of the same kind, not of the same number, or degree of abstraction. In a mass society, they are more detached from reality, more manipulable, more numerous, more likely to provoke intense but fleeting emotions, and at the same time less significant, less inherent in personal life. So this is why the females are more manipulable in this mass society. They're more detached from reality, more manipulable, more numerous in their feminism, more likely to provoke intense with fleeting emotions, or what they seek after at least. And at the same time, that's what everybody seeks after. And at the same time, what they seek after is less significant, less inherent in personal life. The symbols in a primitive society do not permit the free and flexible play of propaganda because they are rigid, stable, and small in number. So the symbols in the primitive society don't permit the bullshitting of propaganda because they're rigid, stable, and small in number. Their nature is also different. Of religious origin at first, they become political in the broad sense. In mass society, finally, we find the maximum deviation between public opinions and latent private opinions, which are either repressed or progressively eliminated. Thus, the masses in contemporary society have made propaganda possible. In fact, propaganda can act only where man's psychology is influenced by the crowd or mass to which he belongs. So the more you belong, the more you are propagandized in contemporary society. Besides, as we have already pointed out, the means of disseminating propaganda depend on the existence of the masses. In the United States, these means are called the mass media of communications with good reason. The mass media of communications with good reason. Without the mass to receive propaganda and carry it along, propaganda is impossible. That's page 95. Leaving off. Still a lot more pages in this section.